Hello dear learners, Namaskar. I welcome you all. In this session, we will discuss about Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, that is also known as shortly RMSA. Before starting this session, let me introduce myself. I, Dr. Banwarilal Meena, Associate Professor, School of Education, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Now we will discuss about Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. However, this program was merged in an integrated scheme named Samagra Shiksha during 2018-19. This topic comes under your course BES 122, named Contemporary India and Education, Block 4, Issues and Concerns in Secondary Education, Unit 13, Universalization of Secondary Education. Our topic, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. Now, we will discuss about objectives of the session are. At the end of the session, you will be able to understand the RMSA, explain process inbuilt in Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, reflect over open and distance learning concerns to secondary education. Now we will discuss about background of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. Due to impact of the programs undertaken for the universalization of elementary education, there is a rise in the demand of education at the secondary level. Despite the increase in the number of secondary schools, the spread of the secondary education throughout the country remains uneven due to regional disparities and differences in the socio-economic background of the people. Several centrally sponsored schemes have been launched in the country for the development of secondary education, namely Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, model schools, girls hostel, ICT at a school, inclusive education for disabled in secondary schools, that is IEDSS, vocational education and language teachers. Here I want to clarify with a view to concern efficient utilization of fund and greater coordination. Other centrally sponsored schemes of secondary education, that is ICT at a school, inclusive education of disabled at secondary stage, IEDSS, vocational education and girls hostel have been subsumed under the existing Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan scheme. Next scheme is National Means Cum Merit Scholarship, NMMS, incentive for girls. Out of these schemes, the highest allocation in the 11th 5-year plan has been made for the Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha program. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan has been launched to meet the rising demand for quality secondary education. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan provides an unique opportunity to improve access and participation for quality secondary education in the country. The model of democratic decentralization promoted by the Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan also aims at improving accountability, transparency, and service delivery, particularly at the district level. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan offers a strategic opportunity to improve access and equity, enhance quality, accountability, and ability to measure learning outcomes, and remote standardization of curriculum and examination across the state. Now we will discuss about introduction to Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan is a centrally sponsored scheme of the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Now it's renamed as Ministry of Education, Government of India, for universal access and improvement of secondary education. It came into being after Central Advisory Board of Education, that is CABE, the highest deliberative and advisory forum on education in the country, with education ministers of all the states and eminent educationists as its member. In 2004 and 2005, decided to make secondary education universal. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan scheme was launched in March 2009. The implementation of the scheme has started from 2009-2010 to provide conditions for an efficient growth, development, and equity for all. The principal objectives are to enhance quality of secondary education and increase the total enrollment rate from 52%, it was as of 2005 and 2006, to 75% in 5 years, that is from 2009 to 2014. This report was mentioned in MHRD report 2014. It aims to provide universal education for all children between 15 to 16 years of age. The vision of secondary education, as mentioned in the framework for implementation of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, is to make good quality education available, accessible, and affordable to all young persons in the age group of 14 to 18 years. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan also aims at improvement of quality of education in secondary schools through appointment of additional teachers, in-service training for teachers, ICT, Information Communication and Technology enabled education, curriculum and teaching learning reforms, etc. Now we will discuss about objectives of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. The objectives of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan are as follow. These objectives mentioned in MHRD report 2014. Objectives are to provide a secondary school within a reasonable distance of any habitation. This should be 5 kilometers for secondary schools and 7 to 10 kilometers for higher secondary schools. Next objective is ensure universal access of secondary education By 2017, gross enrollment rate of 100%. Universal retention by 2020. Next objective is providing access to secondary education with special reference to economically weaker sections of the society. The educationally backward, the girls and the disabled children residing in rural areas and other marginalized categories like SC, scheduled caste, ST, scheduled tribes, OBC, other backward communities, and educationally backward minorities, EBM. RMSA is the first large scale intervention for universalizing access to the quality of secondary education, covering the socio-economic and ecological variations as well as people from diverse educational and cultural background. In order to meet the challenge of universalization of secondary education, USE, this framework further says that is a need for a paradigm shift in the conceptual design of secondary education. The Government of India has approved the following revised norms of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan with effect from 1st April 2013, which are as follows. Number 1, to ensure that all secondary schools have physically facilities, staff and supplies, at least according to the prescribed standards, through financial support in case of government or local body, government aided schools, and appropriate regulatory mechanism in the case of other schools. Next is to improve access the secondary schooling to all young people according to norms through proximate location, says secondary school within 5 kilometers and high secondary school within 7 to 10 kilometers that we discussed in last slide. Efficient and safe transport arrangements or residential facilities, depending on local circumstances, including open schooling. However, in hilly and difficult areas, these norms can be relaxed. Preferably, residential schools may be set up in such areas. Next is to ensure that no child should be deprived from quality secondary education. Disability due to gender, socio-economic, disability and other barriers. Next is to improve quality of secondary education, resulting in enhanced intellectual, social and cultural learning. Next is to ensure that all students pursuing secondary education receive education of good quality. Next is achievement of the above objectives would also, inter alia, signifies substantial progress in the direction of common school system. Thus, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan is a comprehensive program of the government of India to drastically change the scenario of secondary school education in the country. But there are some issues and challenges which are hurdles for successfully implementation of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. These are unskilled human resources to implement such program, adequate allocation, inadequate attention to secondary education. In order to overcome the hindrance and attain quality education, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan made some recommendations. Now we will discuss about some recommendations of Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan provides some key opportunities or recommendations. Proper planning and organization of secondary schools, mapping of secondary school resources, strengthening of existing structure, access and progress in learning outcomes, maintaining a minimum standard in provisions and processes at all secondary schools, quality in teacher training and proper process of teachers appointment, provision of subject and language teacher, use of information and communication technology, that is ICT, improvement of vocational education in schools, bridging gender and social gaps, promoting schooling system, creating space for public private partnership, that is PPP. Now we discuss about open and distance learning concerned to secondary education. The principles of democracy strengthen the role of education to provide equal opportunities for all sections of the society. For the fulfillment of this objective, many countries in the world have recognized that the conventional system of education is not only a costly phenomena but also a less flexible system to meet the growing demands of the public at large. The problems faced by the government include inadequacy of resources and infrastructure, inaccessibility of regular system of education, particularly for underprivileged and marginalized sectors of the society who are either unable to attend educational institutions or have missed the opportunity of securing knowledge under the conventional system of education. In view of these constraints, a system with enormous flexibility is needed to meet the needs of equity and continuing education. As a force contributing to social and economic development, open and distance education is fast becoming an accepted and indispensable part of the mainstream educational system. At present, open and distance education is one of the most rapidly growing field of education, and its potential impact on all education delivery system has been emphasized through the development of multi-channel information technologies. The popular use of ODL system, open and distance learning system of education, is not limited only up to higher education, but it is evident to make school education reach the doorstep of the learners. School education across the world is getting more popularized nowadays. The system has engaged to cater to the education needs of the dropout school students. Persons are already at the job or job field, and the learners, those are curious to study. In India, National Institute of Open Schooling is also doing a substantial work for catering to the learning needs of secondary and senior secondary learners across India through open and distance learning mode. The significance of open and distance learning system of education at the secondary and senior secondary level addresses need of education as follows. It provides easy accessibility to schooling at a very low cost. It provides quality secondary education and senior secondary education within the reach of the learners. It prepares the learners for developing skills and to engage themselves in the world of works with higher productivity. It fulfills the constitutional obligations to provide quality secondary and senior secondary education. It provides flexibility to the learners in terms of time, place, mode, pace, and learner centered learning. It uses context and subject specified pedagogy for making the learner understand the content easily. It fulfills the social needs of the learners and designs the learning activities as per the social and cultural norms of the society. We discussed about Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan in detail. Now let's sum up. Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan is a comprehensive program of the government of India to drastically change the scenario of secondary schools in the country. But there are some issues and interventions and challenges which are responsible for the successful implementation of the Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. In order to overcome the hindrance and attain the quality education at secondary level, Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan has made recommendations like proper planning and organization of secondary schools, mapping of secondary school resources, and strengthening of existing structure, access, and progress in learning outcomes, maintaining a minimum standard in provisions and processes at all secondary schools, quality in teacher training and teachers appointment, provisions for subject and language teachers, use of information communication and technology, and vocationalization of secondary education, bridging gender and social gaps, promoting open schooling and creating space for public private partnership in education. Keeping in view the above, in the present session we discussed the issues of secondary education which are very much important for achieving universalization of secondary education. Thank you for listening this video, and I hope you enjoy this session. Thank you very much to all of you नमस्कार।